With the end of Windows 10 support in most countries back in October, we've seen quite the rise in users that are willing to give Linux a shot. Zorin OS, a distribution that attempts to ease users into Linux by providing a familiar yet still different user interface, has seen a massive increase in downloads.
I've been converted. I like Linux now. Not only that, I use it every day, and frankly, couldn't live without it.
Windows 11 was the operating system that no one asked for, and quite honestly, no one really wants.
Bill Gates is watching the Windows empire crack as Linux surges harder than anyone thought possible. What's shocking is that Microsoft didn't lose users to Apple or some new competitor. It drove them straight into Linux by dismantling every reason people stayed on Windows. Microsoft didn't just push users away, it surgically removed every barrier that once kept them trapped. And the fallout is now impossible to ignore.
More and more PC builders are now using Linux instead of Windows. And for you super nerds, this data is actually really fun to look at. This is the desktop operating system market share worldwide chart, and the red indicates Linux steadily increasing. Compare that to the blue Windows line, and in the last decade, they went from 90% down to 72%. It's pretty wild seeing that many people move away from Windows.
Windows is not losing users. It is hemorrhaging trust. People are not upgrading to something better. They are escaping something that became worse. And the destination is shocking every analyst, every investor, and apparently every executive at Microsoft. They are not going to Mac. They are not going to Chrome OS. They are going to Linux, the free open-source operating system that the entire tech industry dismissed for 2 decades is now pulling in real users at a pace nobody predicted. Not enthusiasts, not developers, ordinary people. And once you understand what Microsoft actually did to its own product, the migration makes complete sense.
PC gamers and normal users are also just getting sick of all the bloatware and nonsense that comes with a Windows machine. If you've ever tried a Linux distro before, such as Pop! OS, Ubuntu Desktop, or even Mint, then you'll quickly realize how less annoying those operating systems are compared to Windows.
This is not a story about Linux becoming perfect. It is about Windows becoming unbearable at the exact moment people were forced to choose. When Windows 11 adoption started falling. While Windows 10 usage rose even as its end-of-support deadline approached, the message was unmistakable. Users knew Windows 10 was dying. Microsoft warned them clearly, and they still refused to move forward. They clung to the old system like a life raft, not out of loyalty, but out of rejection. That is not preference, it is a verdict. On October 14, 2025, Microsoft cut off Windows 10 security updates and forced hundreds of millions into a corner. Upgrade to an OS they did not trust or find a way out. Linux was not chosen because it was perfect. It was chosen because it was the only real exit when staying finally became intolerable.
Windows coming with spyware pre-installed and calling it a feature, and Apple keeping your data private until it sends it to ChatGPT. You may be looking for an alternative, and let me tell you, when it comes to the rest, Linux is the best.
The betrayal runs deeper than a deadline. Windows 10 launched in 2015 with a specific promise baked into its identity. Microsoft positioned it as the last Windows. Not a version among many, but the final destination. They gave it away as a free upgrade. They reframed it as a living service rather than a boxed product. They built an entire narrative around permanence and stability. Hundreds of millions of people organized their digital lives around that promise. They recommended it. They deployed it across businesses. They taught their parents how to use it. And then Microsoft quietly decided the promise no longer applied, announced Windows 11, drew a new hardware line in the sand, and left a massive portion of their loyal user base standing on the wrong side of it.
Windows 11 has very strict hardware requirements. Microsoft locks down bypasses for online accounts, increasingly tries to shove AI functionalities down your throat, keeps breaking core functionalities of Windows month over month, and honestly, it just isn't as appealing to many as it used to be.
That hardware line is the TPM 2.0 requirement, and it hit people with the force of something genuinely unfair. TPM stands for Trusted Platform Module. It is a security chip. Millions of computers built before a certain point simply do not have it, or have an older version that does not qualify. These are not slow machines. These are not broken machines. These are computers that boot fast, run applications cleanly, handle video calls and spreadsheets, and creative work without complaint. Microsoft looked at those machines and declared them incompatible. Not outdated in performance terms. Incompatible on a technicality that the average user had never heard of and had no way to address without buying entirely new hardware.
With Windows 10 no longer receiving feature or security updates as of October 14th, millions of people are finding themselves trying to upgrade their computers to Windows 11, oftentimes at the expense of having to go out and buy a brand new desktop or laptop that they don't really need or want.
The message Microsoft sent was blunt, even if unintentional. Your working computer is now our problem, not our responsibility. Go buy something new. Linux sent the opposite message. Install us, and your machine is welcome here. That contrast between rejection and inclusion became the emotional center of gravity for the entire migration. For the first time, the Linux pitch was not just ideological, it was practical and personal.
Out of big tech's pockets, keeping their old PCs and not turning them into e-waste, and making the switch to daily driving Linux, and finding that not only does it work better than their old computers when they were running Windows 10, but they actually get better performance out of Linux on a 10-year-old PC than they would get out of a brand new computer that has all the Windows 11 and manufacturer bloat pre-installed on it.
And even the users whose machines cleared the TPM requirement. Even the people who could upgrade without buying anything new, many of them did, and then left anyway, because Windows 11 gave them fresh reasons to abandon it.
Linux is an operating system that is constantly being improved, updated, and secured by some of the most talented and experienced programmers on the internet. Additionally, there are so many versions of the OS to choose from. Its hardware requirements are super flexible, and the best part, it is completely free to download and use.
The core shell started degrading in ways that felt inexcusable for a flagship operating system. The Start menu froze. File Explorer crashed mid-session. Search returned results slowly, or returned nothing at all. Settings pages loaded blank. These are not peripheral features. These are the fundamental surfaces of the operating system, the parts every user touches dozens of times a day. When they behave unreliably, the entire system stops feeling like infrastructure. It starts feeling like software you have to watch, babysit, and work around. Microsoft was simultaneously demanding that users trust Windows 11 more deeply and giving them daily evidence that it deserved less trust. That contradiction destroyed confidence faster than any competitor ever could have.
Just recently, Windows got updated, and finally the full effect of Windows Copilot is here. From now on, your AI companion is always watching your device. It's Microsoft's touted see what you see and hear what you hear technology. Screenshots every few seconds, and AI interpreting what you do on screen and storing all this historically.
Then, Microsoft introduced Copilot, and they introduced it everywhere at once. Taskbar, Settings, Notepad, Paint, Edge, File Explorer, right-click menus. The AI layer did not arrive as an optional tool that power users could explore. It arrived as a presence embedded across every surface of the operating system. And the problem was never that AI is useless. The problem was that Microsoft made the choice for you. People opened Notepad to write 3 sentences and found a chatbot interface waiting. They opened Paint to resize an image and found AI generation panels taking up real estate.
People are considering Linux to be a viable choice for their desktops, but also that we have seen many improvements to both hardware and software support, that many vendors just straight up offer Linux as a cheaper alternative for their devices. Lenovo has a custom page for their Linux-compatible devices, and Dell also started to ship Ubuntu with some of their models as a much cheaper Windows alternative.
The operating system started feeling like a product being iterated on by a product team that had forgotten who actually uses it. Users are not beta testers for Microsoft's AI strategy. They are people with work to do. The moment the OS becomes something you have to navigate around rather than something that works invisibly beneath you, you start looking for the exit. The tech community called it microslop. That word spread because it named something real. It captured the cumulative feeling of an operating system that kept getting new things added to it that nobody asked for, while the foundational experience kept getting worse. And the people who felt it were not fringe users. They were mainstream professionals, people who had never questioned their operating system before in their lives, suddenly questioning everything.
Number 1 is privacy. Modern OSs like Windows and macOS tend to not respect our privacy by collecting data and having all kinds of telemetry. On the other hand, certain Linux distros like Kali Linux are open source and do not collect any data whatsoever. The second reason to use Linux is because it's free. Not only can you try different Linux distros, they will also not cost you a single cent, which is definitely a benefit. And lastly, Linux tends to be more stable since it rarely gets big feature updates, which can break things. That's actually why 90% of all internet infrastructure runs on Linux.
If this feels uncomfortably accurate to your own experience with Windows, hit like, share it, and subscribe, because this story is only getting worse. Then came the detail that converted frustration into outrage for even the least technical users. Ads. Inside a paid operating system.
AMD graphics drivers downgrading themselves, even mid-game. Default apps being overwritten, the Windows search being utterly useless sometimes, problems with Bluetooth pairing, sleep problems, and many more.
You purchased Windows, either directly or bundled into the price of a machine. Money moved from your pocket to Microsoft's. And after that transaction, the Start menu still runs promotions for Microsoft 365. Edge still interrupts your workflow to push Bing. OneDrive runs persistent upsell campaigns in the system tray. The Windows setup process steers you toward a Microsoft account, requires an internet connection to complete on some versions, and presents consumer Microsoft services as defaults you have to actively opt out of. Every step of the experience is monetized. Every surface of the interface is an opportunity for Microsoft to extract additional revenue from people who already paid.
Are you sick of paying for Windows just so you can remove that annoying watermark and set your own wallpaper? Or maybe you just don't want Microsoft tracking you, or you resent them for constantly trying to force you to use Bing? Linux Mint might just be the operating system for you.
Compare that to installing Ubuntu, or Linux Mint, or Fedora. The installer asks your language, your time zone, your username, and then it stops. It does not ask for an account with a cloud provider. It does not run promotions during setup. It does not embed advertising in the desktop. You finish the install and the computer is yours. That experience, that quiet respect for the user's time and intelligence, became the single most powerful Linux advertisement Microsoft ever created. And Microsoft created it for free.
You know, Linux can be a great choice for an operating system. It's fast, lightweight, customizable to no end, and just features so many different experiences that can help you with your work or setting up the ultimate gaming machine.
Valve dismantled that argument with the Steam Deck, a consumer handheld device running Linux, shipping at mass market volumes, playing thousands of games that were built for Windows through a compatibility layer called Proton. It worked well enough that people used it daily without thinking about the operating system underneath. The Steam Deck did not just prove that Linux could run games. It proved it to people who never cared about operating systems in the first place, people who just wanted to play, and it proved it through direct personal experience rather than forum posts and YouTube tutorials.
Linux allows you to build or install so many customizations on top of the kernel. The exact reason there are so many distributions out there that look very different from each other. And that's really cool.
Then YouTube itself changed the social calculus entirely. A new category of video emerged and exploded in views. Regular people documenting their switch from Windows to Linux, teachers, accountants, retirees, people with no particular technical background filming their screens, walking through an installation, showing their desktop 2 months later, explaining that nothing broke and everything works. These videos performed because they answered the question most people were actually asking, which was not whether Linux is technically capable, but whether someone like me can actually do this. Once enough ordinary people saw ordinary people doing it successfully, the fear evaporated.
So Linux is the only choice where we don't participate in this AI companion experiment.
Institutions ran a parallel calculation with spreadsheets instead of emotions. Windows licensing at organizational scale is significant money, recurring annually, scaling with headcount. The TPM 2.0 mandate added hardware refresh costs on top of licensing costs at a moment when many organizations had no budget for either. Linux costs nothing to license, runs on existing hardware, and gives IT departments direct control over the environment without negotiating with a vendor whose priorities keep shifting. Cities and government agencies that made the switch stopped being curiosities and started being case studies. When public institutions move, the credibility of the alternative becomes established.
Linux is currently seeing a lot of change, and if you have been following the trends over the past couple of years, then you can see a shift that more and more companies are evaluating Linux as a viable platform.
The application dependency problem dissolved in the background while all of this was happening. The modern knowledge worker lives inside a browser. Gmail, Google Docs, Notion, Slack, Zoom, Figma, all of them run identically on Linux. Microsoft Office was the last genuine lock-in argument, and LibreOffice closed that gap enough for most workflows. Blender, DaVinci Resolve, Inkscape, and Krita all run natively. The person with one Windows-specific application can run a virtual machine for that single use case and use Linux for everything else.
They are most likely stealing your information and selling it. I don't know what it is, I could be wrong. They also like to do the most random background operations. I have no idea what any of this is. But if you have a low performance PC, Linux is a wonderful option for you.
Strip away the gaming barrier. Strip away the app dependency. Strip away the social fear. What is left keeping someone on Windows is inertia. And Microsoft spent 3 consecutive years giving people reasons to overcome it.
When you install Linux, you can take a deep, calm breath, knowing that your private data isn't being sent off to some Microsoft server, or that your hand is being held by Grandpa Tim, who doesn't even know what a computer is.
What's a computer?
No, with Linux, the OS is built to fulfill the user, not to fulfill Tim Cook's pockets.
Linux feels different in a way people struggle to explain until they find the word. Calm. Windows is always syncing, prompting, selling, doing something in the background. Linux is silent. You open an app, use it, close it, and it's gone. The computer has no agenda beyond your instructions. And once people feel that level of ownership, going back to Windows stops being a choice and starts feeling like a punishment. Did Windows push you away, or did Linux pull you in? Tell me exactly what made you switch or what's still stopping you.